Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. As always, I have a fantastic guest with me today. He has an incredible story of empowerment and truly being able to find his voice. His name is Larry Stein. He is a speaker, mentor, author, CEO, and investment advisor. His book is titled Free to Speak, which chronicles his journey from stuttering to public speaking. For decades, Larry struggled with stuttering, which dominated his life, compromised his career, impacted his relationships, and caused recurring bouts of devastating depression. Finally, at the age of 55, Larry, I want to say the tender young age of 55, Larry developed strategies that not only changed his life, but also the lives of the people he now mentors. Today, he has the business of his dreams. He runs the business of his dreams, is a public speaker, and mentors people who stutter all over the world free of charge. Larry, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's great to meet you. This will be fun. Looking
It's an
forward to it.
honor to meet you, and you have such a compelling story. And, I think the reason why I emphasize the tender young age of 55 is just to emphasize to the audience that we can change any of our challenges at any age. So tell us your story, Larry. Tell us how you did it and tell us what brought you to this point that you are now talking to me.
Yeah, it's amazing that I'm even just talking to you, really. I mean, and frankly, at the end of this podcast, you're going to go back to your normal stuff that you do every day. And I'm going to probably, after we sign off, I'll probably take a deep breath and go, and just be so thankful that I'm able to communicate this way, because that was not how it used to be.
Mhm.
When I was young, um, I had a pretty severe stutter. It was pretty severe. I had my little pet phrases: "How are you? How you doing?" Uh, that kind of thing. But I was pretty limited, and you see, like in the movie, um, The King's Speech. Everyone says, "Oh, so you were like the King's Speech." No, not at all. If I stuttered that way, I think I would have not even bothered doing what I did. Um, my my speech was, uh, was lips pursed, head shaking. In fact, why don't I just show you? Why don't I just show you? If you had asked my name just 10, 11 years ago, this is what you would have seen.
Mhm.
And and by the way, I would have tried to get out of having to say my name in any number of different ways. But this is what you would have seen. And I'll try and make it brief, but it would be more than this. Hi, I'm
Oh, wow. Oh,
Larry Stein. I mean, I could have gone on there for a long time.
yeah. I'm going to interrupt you just for one moment because for those of you who are listening to the audio, and of course you can't see Larry's movement right now, you might want to hop over to YouTube. So at the beginning of this episode, you can see what he was demonstrating to me, and it's a very that'll leave an impression on you because it's painful just to watch, and you can almost see that your words were stuck somewhere deep inside of you and just couldn't come out.
And in fact, while I was doing that, and I cut it off. I mean, I cut it off because frankly, I would be exhausted, and I would be my jaw would be sore, my face would be sore. So I just cut it off so that I could be, here with you today. But that's what it was. Whether you asked me my name at the age of 5 or 55, that's what you would have seen. And um, that was head shaking, eyes closed, just in pain. And a friend from college recently described it. He said that the first time he met me, he thought I was having a stroke. And so, so it's so over the years though, my speech improved, but I had, people think that what you see is the whole thing. And what's inside of the person who stutters, or in this case, me, is a lot more. I felt like a prisoner of my own mind. I had so much to say, but I couldn't say it. And I wanted to say it, but I didn't feel that I could. And once in a while, I would have, days where I could speak more freely. And I thought, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm done with this. And then one stutter leads to another, and splat on my face all over again. And so there was always this hope, but it never came around. And, it was a very difficult road. And, people think that, oh, because you stutter, you must be more empathetic toward people. You must be more caring toward people. And the truth is that I was so inwardly focused. How can I get out this word, that sound? How can I get out whatever I wanted to say? That there was no empathy. I was focused on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I frankly, in looking back at it, well, I was a nice guy. I was always a nice guy. I was not such a great person overall, to tell you the truth. So this change that I made in myself, frankly, it was all about money. That's the odd part, is that, so in my 20s, this was so difficult because, well, in my teens, let me just go back and just give you some context. So you said I'm an investment advisor. That's true. I have my own firm. I opened that up in 2010. So it's been almost 14 years now. And now I'm 67, by the way. You may not look it, but
So am I.
you are too. You don't look it at all.
Oh boy,
Wow,
thank you. Neither do you. 1956 was a very good year.
apparently. um, so um, I didn't start speaking, by the way, until I was 4. So there must have been something going on there. And fortunately, unlike a lot of kids who stutter, I had a lot of friends, including very close friends who lived on my street, because I was really good in sports. I was a big guy. Everyone wanted me on their team. Sometimes they wanted me to be the captain, even though I, couldn't really say as much as I would want. But so I was very fortunate, and I had a loving family, and that helped a lot. A lot of people don't have that.
Mm.
A lot of people are much more scarred than I was. So I always knew what I wanted to do. At the age of 11, I knew that I wanted to be in the investment field. My dad would sit in the corner of our living room after dinner, and he'd have his newspaper open, and we had newspapers, and I would, wonder what he was looking at. And one day I talked to him and went behind him and saw, and I was hooked. I just thought this most fascinating thing. Plus, it was something I could do without talking, probably. And so that's what I wanted to do. At the age of 12, I was reading Business Week cover to cover. I was investing by the age of 13. My first investment, Champion Home Builders, went from 28 and 7/8 to 64 and a half or something like that in a matter of six months, maybe 9 months. And it had dropped 4 points, and my dad just sold it without telling me. It ended up going to 120. I didn't know any. I thought that was my own genius, but I had just read it in one of his investing magazines. Let's be honest. So So I was hooked with that. And even on family vacations, I would bring investment books with me and read. I would go from the football field over to the local library. I read all the books on investing. So when it came time for college, um, um, I knew what I wanted to do, and my dad encouraged me to talk to our broker. I'd never met him in person. I went down to Chicago. I live in the northern suburbs of Chicago. I went downtown. I met him, and here's how it went. He said, "So in Chicago, you can be in Chicago, but that's all sales. You want to be in sales? No. You can go to New York. That's where the analysts are. Do you want to be an analyst? No." And that was just about the end of our conversation. My whole life dream gone in about 3 minutes because I knew I couldn't sell. I mean, I could, barely ask him the question. And I wanted to be an analyst, but I knew I couldn't make it in New York because how could I even ask for directions? I had never been away from it for my family. I mean, this is a whole different thing. And so I just gave up in like 3 minutes. And that set the stage for a lifetime of compromise.
Mm.
And I ended up being accounting was a very popular major down there. My dad said, "Oh, why don't you be, going to accounting?" I had no idea what it was, but I said, "Sure." I didn't think I'd have to talk much. I had no idea what it was, and I hated school. I hated working in the field, and I hated myself.
Mm.
I knew I was wasting my life. It was not me. It's a great career for other people, many of my friends, but it was just not me. And I knew I wanted to be an investment, in the investment field, but I didn't see a way to get there. So I went from that. I I went through depressions after that. Very difficult. I'm I'm sometimes I'm surprised I'm still alive.
Mhm.
Um, but fortunately, I met my wife in college, and with her, I had really good speech, and I could express myself, and that felt great. We had kids, and that was the most wonderful thing in the world to me. Now we have 3 grandchildren,
Mhm.
and I was just with our newest one yesterday,
Oh,
and
congratulations.
yeah, that's it's all very wonderful. I'm living the life beyond my dreams, but it was a difficult start, and finally, but over the years, just getting out there in the work world, my speech improved a lot. I I was in things that I didn't think I would have to talk much, but when you move up, you have to talk a little bit
Mhm.
more. And I became a consultant at an investor relations firm. So I was kind of more of a writer, but I was, consulting and doing that stuff. And so finally, at the age of 47, a friend of mine suggested that his cousin, who had a little insurance firm, may want to open an investment up. Would you be interested in talking with him? And he and I hit it off. At that time, I could do small talk. I had gotten pretty good at small talk. Um, and and we hit it off. He hired me. I took like a 2/3 cut in pay. I mean, here I am at the age of 47. I took a 2/3 cut in pay. That's pretty huge, wife and kids, house, all that.
Mhm.
But I really wanted to be in the field. And finally, at the age of 54, I opened up my own firm. I thought I could speak well enough to do that. Plus, I was given a gift. Email was now a popular way to set up meetings. And so
Mhm.
I set up meetings. I set up 10 meetings a week, all through email, never spoke a word. And we just had this small talk, things. And I networked all day and night. But in the investment field, you're asking for $1 million to open an account. And to get to that point takes a lot of challenging conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And small talk is not going to get you there. So I had relatively few clients. I had a son who was I think just graduating from an Ivy League school, and another son who was going to an even more expensive school. And money was getting tight. And after a year, I was so thrilled that I had my own firm. I created it with my ideals and ethics, and I was so proud of myself. And I realized I needed a lot more money. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so, the thing that I didn't tell you was about 5 years before that, my cousin uh, worked as a director of a very small nonprofit. She asked me to be on the board because most of the other board members were very old. And so I said, sure. I mean, no one asked me to do anything in my life other than play sports. And so I said, sure. And I went on the board. And a few years later, to my shock, they asked me to be the president out of left field, just because they had no one else other than a person who was 85 years old. And of course I said, what did I say?
You probably said no.
I said no, because
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to lead board meetings, and by that time I was I was at this consulting firm, and I was leading meetings with 3 or 4 people,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to do that. Um, but leading a meeting with 15, 20, 25, 30 people, I had never
Mm-hmm.
done that. And I'd have to give speeches, about 3 or 4, 5 minute, 5 to 10 minute speeches a year. And the last speech I gave was just to my peers in the accounting firm, was a 10-minute speech that took 28 minutes
Uh-huh.
to get some idea as to how severe my stuttering was. Okay, 10 minutes took 28 minutes.
I have got to ask you, at the end of it, were you just absolutely exhausted?
Absolutely exhausted, just just drained,
Yeah.
absolutely drained. And it's a very difficult experience, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
hard thing to say, okay, I'm going to do it again. So anyways, this little nonprofit, they kept on asking me over and over again, and probably by the third or fourth time I said, fine, I'll do it. Which is, I mean, my default answer for everything was always no.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, no.
Mm-hmm.
And so I missed out on a lot of opportunities in life, both career and social, because it was always no.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I took that post, and I was very fortunate in that in one of my first speeches, well, that I saw a friend in the corner of the room, and she has a great smile, and she smiled at me, and that kind of comforted me. And then I looked at my cousin in the middle and my wife on the left, and I just did the speech to 150 people, was looking at 3 people. So this was the beginning of me working through the psychological
Mm-hmm.
aspects of speech. And one night I came out of a board meeting, and this was after being a year in business, and you know, thrilled, but I needed more clients. And I'm walking out of this board meeting. I was kind of upset because the board was old, and they kept on saying no to my ideas. But it was kind of frustrating. I'm walking out frustrated. It's a snowy night in Chicago, and I'm about to open the door, putting on my hood, my zipping up, my gloves, this and that. I go, wait, I speak better when I public speak. why don't I public speak all the time? I and I was speaking in phrases when I was public speaking. I'm going to speak phrase to phrase to phrase. From now on, I'm going to speak one phrase at a time. All this in 20 seconds, not planned, no thought, nothing. It just hit me as I'm putting on my clothes to go outside. And that was the start. That was the start. I was 55 years old. That was the start. And I began speaking in phrases, something I had learned in speech therapy when I was, in elementary school and in junior high school and then in high school. Never used it in my life because I was, so wrought out with stuttering, which is very, very common with people going through speech therapy. And here I was speaking in phrases, and I made a little improvement. I noticed for the first time in my life that while I always thought maybe I was improving my speech, this seemed real. And I began to look at other speakers. And I noticed Matt Lauer on the Today Show, who I watched every morning. And he was so smooth, so compelling. Now, of course, he's been discredited, but he was
Well,
such a compelling speaker.
I'm smiling and laughing just a little bit because it's right here on the left side of me. I actually have it marked. It's page 54 for the listeners if they want to be specific. So write that down.
Write that down. And so I began to speak like Matt Lauer. I would, if you, here, I'm going to be taller in my chair so you can see my hand motion. I mean, I still speak a lot like Matt Lauer. I have his hand motion.
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I realized he was emphasizing words. I said, wow, that's a cool thing. That's how he got you to listen. And I said, what a novel thing. And of course, I began watching other speakers, and they all emphasize words. And 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 I'll just shorten that whole part in terms of how I got into the breathing. And but I ended up relearning to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a mix of Matt Lauer and so I just kind of thought that why don't I just mimic how a professional speaker speaks? And I brought that down into breathe, emphasize, and phrase. So I relearned to speak, and I realized that if I were more expressive, that would help. And the emphasis became a thing I realized for airflow. And it's sort of like singing. We had talked about singing before we came on the podcast. People who stutter do not sing. Even people terribly severe stutters. I used to sing all the time. I used to sing in the shower. It was like my great release because I could do something with my mouth. I could express myself, and I could sing. And there are, and I realized that there are some similarities, not all, some similarities between singing and talking. That you take a breath, you sing on the exhale, you emphasize a word toward the end of a musical phrase. You sing in phrases. And I use that as a model for speaking also. So I basically relearned to speak, and I thought that would be all that I needed. It was not even close. Maybe if I was trying to go from here to there, maybe 40% of the way, maybe less.
Mm-hmm.
But I was improving. I had a foundation that I could work from, and that was unbelievable. It was incredible to feel some confidence. And from there, I began to, speak in more challenging situations, not just small talk. And it hit me one day, like a shovel over the head, that 50 years of stuttering really messed me up. And I realized I was avoiding situations. I was avoiding words. I was substituting words in and out. My mind was going a million miles an hour. Always, always, at all times. How do I say this? How do I get around this word, that word? How do I, should I even speak at all? And I began to work through these things. And I realized that probably just like you in martial arts, and I don't know anything about martial arts, but I'm guessing you have to practice it so much that it becomes you. It becomes a natural movement that you don't even think about, that it becomes, right? And you're nodding your head. Very nice. Okay, you're doing just what you should. um, yes. And so I realized when the pressure was on, my breathe emphasize phrase would go out the window. I had to make it automatic. I had to do something I was a natural athlete. I was not one who trained. I was not one who worked hard at it. I had to become disciplined. And so I made this me. I practiced it so much in so many situations that it became automatic. And now, speaking with you, rather than focusing on this, I'm pointing to my mouth, and I am focused on you. And I just said I'm going to do two things in every conversation. I'm going to enjoy the conversation, which is totally different than the world of stuttering. And I'm going to give to you, the listener, something of myself, whatever I think you need. Totally different than the stuttering mindset. I had to work through a victim mindset where I felt, woe is me. And actually, it's interesting. Today is my brother's birthday. He passed away. I think it's 2 years ago or 3 years ago now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he was young. He was only 71,
Oof.
and that was very difficult. But he was Mr. Charm, and whereas here I was struggling so much, and here he was, so fluid, so charming, and um, I was, picking up things from him that, everything was so easy. And I realized I had to break this victim mindset. And it was very real. And if you go on Facebook and you go to the stuttering sites, you'll see everyone talking, woe is me. And that used to be me, why was I stuck with this? And there were so many psychological things I had to work through. And I'm sure there's more things probably, I'm sure. But my basic thing in working through them, and I was just desperate. I had taken Psych 100 in college, and I didn't have to study because I was in a fraternity. They wanted me in a fraternity to play football, and we had the answers to all the tests, so I didn't have to study. So what did I know about psychology? But I stumbled onto something just in desperation, that whatever I was thinking, I'm going to stop. If I thought it was one of these crazy inclinations that I had, like avoiding or like shortening my words to the very fewest words so I didn't have to talk, there were so many of them. And I began to do the opposite. And I would be in conversations, or I'd be walking down the street and I would just flip my hands like that right in front of people. I don't think they realized I was doing it. And I said, I want to do the opposite. And I would pause. I would think, all right, so what's the exact opposite of what I'm thinking right now? Well, I didn't realize, years later, I learned this was cognitive behavioral therapy, to do the opposite and to keep doing it and you're changing your behavior.
Mhm.
It's a very powerful way to change behavior. I didn't know this. I was just doing it.
Mhm.
And so I began to do that with all these crazy thoughts that I had. And then that got me, again, a little further toward my goal, which was really to be able to be comfortable enough to ask for $1 million, to maybe say my name a little easier, be able to have real conversations with people, to build my business.
Mhm.
Again,
I've I have to
all about
say
money.
this is so fascinating. That's why my eyes kind of popped when you just did that little hand flip thing, because
Yeah.
there is a mechanism in the brain. It's like it's this cross connection that when you do
Hmm.
something like that, especially if you're crossing over your center, that it really triggers a change in your nervous system and a change in your brain. And there's
Hmm.
actually a lot of like treatment modalities or different movement modalities that use that. So that's so fascinating to hear that.
Oh,
And it actually worked for me. This was probably, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. I was in a class with one of those movement modalities. I'm a
uh-huh.
Feldenkrais practitioner, so I was in a Feldenkrais class with one of my colleagues, and we did one of those things where the hands were going in one direction and the eyes and the head went in the opposite direction. And all of a sudden, I had one of those mental head smacking moments because I'm struggling with my third book that I'm working on, and I was in such a stuck place. And all of a sudden, right there, it was like, I know what I'm doing wrong and I know what I need to do. And it was just like a choir of angels began to sing. So it's so amazing that you said that. You had no idea what you were doing, but you just kind of
Oh,
flipping the script like that and it completely
yeah.
changed.
Well, I mean, for me, I think that was just something that I was just kind of reminding myself of, and
Hmm.
maybe it had more of an effect than I know.
Hmm.
But it was recognizing these crazy inclinations built up over 50 years of, call it trauma if you want,
Hmm.
uh, with stuttering.
Hmm.
And I was facing these things one after the other. And then I realized that I had to do more than that again. So I had this foundation down. I relearned to speak, and I had really impacted how I thought about things, how I behaved, my psychological foundation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I realized I had to go one step at a time through
Hmm.
speaking situations,
Hmm.
and just progress through that. And that's what I did. I created something of a hierarchy.
Hmm.
Beginning, the easiest conversation would be to talk to my wife and kids,
Hmm.
and then, friends. I remember the first time I told a story, I was probably 56, 57 years old.
Wow.
The first time I told a story with
So what
friends
was
there.
that like for
I
you
can
when you
picture it.
realized you were able to tell this story and you finished the story and you had everybody's attention when you were telling it? What was that experience like?
Oh, it was such a kick. I can't tell you, Cheryl. So even just, I just kind of took a chance. There were probably six of us there, friends. These are just friends. And I just kind of said, I just kind of fell into it. I said, I'm going to just tell this thing. And and as I'm talking, so one fun thing that I didn't tell you when I began doing these little speeches for that nonprofit, one thing that I did was I realized I had to do something to calm my nervousness. So I would play around up there, not only with humor, but I got the crazy idea. And I mean, there was so much craziness that I went through. I was going to pause so long until I see someone get fidgety, and then I'll continue. This is the opposite of the stuttering mind. I kept on doing things opposite.
Mhm.
The stuttering mind says, I have to say this as fast as I can and get off of here. No, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to pause. The hardest thing just about for people who stutter is to pause because they don't think they're going to get started again. It's so hard to restart a sentence. Hardest thing. And I said, I'm going to pause and I'm going to wait until someone gets started. So I remember telling the story and I paused and I'm looking at all the faces, and the faces used to paralyze me. It was like 1,000 searchlights on me.
Mm.
I used to be paralyzed. And I changed that paradigm from the searchlights to feeling warmth. I felt warmth. And after I was done, it was just, but in just doing it, it was just such a kick to engage people and look at their eye to eye and pause and feel the warmth and feel their attention. It was an incredible feeling, and I was hooked.
Mhm.
I was frankly hooked, and that was the beginning of so much stuff. So all of this was just a small steps. I was not a hero, believe
Mhm.
me. I was not a hero. I went in very small steps because in the past I always thought, oh, I'm going to do something big, you know, and fall flat on my
Mhm.
face. Very small steps, but something happened in those small steps that was incredible, and that
Mhm.
was I gained confidence,
Mhm.
true confidence, not this flimsy stuff that, you know, uh, gee, I hope I can,
Mhm.
affirmations or that kind of stuff. Real, true confidence
Mhm.
built by true experience, by stacking one small success after another and doing it in rapid succession, day after day, all through the day,
Mhm.
and working through this until I got to the top of my hierarchy, which was to say my name.
Mhm.
That was at the top of my hierarchy. Something you did quite easily at the age of 4 without even thinking about it. For me, that was my biggest challenge.
Mhm.
And all I wanted to do was be able to say it without going through what you saw me go through. And that was just a little bit of it. And so that was a multi-month project to
Mhm.
say my name, multi-month. And I began, calling places on the phone. I'd call a hardware store. Do you have a hammer? But first I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Larry Stein. Do you have a hammer? Now they don't care what my name is, so
Mhm.
it's a no pressure introduction.
Mhm.
They don't want to hear what my name is. They just want to get off the phone, right?
Mhm.
And of course they have a hammer. It's a hardware store.
Mhm.
And so I did things like that. I would call, hotels with like 2,000 rooms. Of course they have a room, but I first introduced myself. They don't want to hear that. So it's a no. If I went to a business meeting and I had a name tag on, I'd walk around and introduce myself to everyone because they know my name already.
Mhm.
So anyway, so I did that kind of stuff. I would introduce myself to little kids. They don't care what my name is. Wherever I went, I would introduce myself in really super easy things. But face to face with an adult, I had never done that willingly in my life. I'm 57 years old. Never introduced myself in my life.
I just want to stop you for one moment because you have so many golden nuggets in what you have been saying that I've been writing them down because I don't want to forget them. And I want to be able to emphasize them for the listeners because I think they are so important because you kind of passed over this word, but I want to bring it back up again when you said trauma, maybe that was, whatever. And what you experienced growing up really was a lot of trauma. I mean, it was not only traumatic for you, it was traumatic for your family and God bless them for being so loving and supporting because a lot of other families might not have been so understanding. But that is a level of trauma that you have to work through. And yeah, so I mean, you just kind of say, well, maybe it was, but kudos to you for being able to overcome that because that trauma is very powerful. I also love the way that you're talking about play and I noted it in the book too, because you were even talking when you were helping your dad out in his store. He had a clothing store, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you were with customers and you were watching how your dad was interacting with the customers, he was actually playing with them and having fun. And you thought, oh, hey, maybe I can do that. So you started mimicking what he was doing and playing with the audience, the customers, and so you were able to communicate that way. And there is an incredible power in play because it takes a lot of pressure off of us. And even in my martial arts that I study, And I couldn't believe this when I first went into class and they're pounding the heck out of each other. And my sensei said, okay, now everybody play. And I'm going, if that's your idea of play, I would hate to see you fight. But it's so much easier to learn. Our brain is so much more receptive when we're playing instead of putting all that pressure of like work on us. The other thing I wanted to mention
Well,
is the small
here,
steps. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to jump in here for a second. So if you think about it, when you're stuttering, it's the opposite of play. It's, it's so, I don't know, difficult, and you're wrought up and you're rigid and you're tight and you're
Hmm.
fearful and all these things. So for me, again, I was going to do the opposite of everything related to stuttering. I was
Hmm.
going to break this thing. I had pictured stuttering almost like, I don't know if you remember 2001, A Space Odyssey, the big monolith, that big
Hmm. Hmm.
dark gray thing. That's how I was almost viewing stuttering. And I was going to chip away at this one piece at a time.
Hmm.
And psychologically, playing was so opposite to stuttering. I had a million things that I was doing opposite to stuttering. Rather than be focused here, I was going to give. Rather than be wrought up, I was going to just surrender. And I was just going to play. There were a million of them. Keep going.
Okay, well, that's another thing that you just brought up, acceptance. And we use that a lot in martial arts as well, too. Accept the fact that someone's trying to attack you. And believe me, it took me several years to learn that one. But even as you were describing how, the opposite of play, when you're struggling as a stutterer, I could see it even when you're describing it in your body language. I mean, your neck got tense, your shoulders came up, and you just contracted. I could see you kind of just I saw this like huge anvil, I guess it was what on your head, this incredible like 1,000 pound weight. So I would imagine that that was so liberating to be able to go into the play and changing the script and the paradigm that you must have felt like almost like you were reborn. I know, okay, that's melodramatic, but it had to have been incredibly liberating and freeing for you.
The time when I really felt that is when I was finally able to say my name at the age
Mm.
of 57. That was that was the moment. So I'm just going to give you a brief little rundown on that. And so I was 57. I had been practicing for months. In easy situations, calling, introduce myself to little kids, this and that, easy situations. And I had just joined a new synagogue, and uh, which was different for me also because usually I would hide behind my wife and kids for that, and she had not made the change yet. So here I was by myself, and it was the third week I was there, and I decided at the end of services that I was going to meet everyone that I can.
Mm.
And that such a different thought than any thought that had ever come out of my mind. Again, just like the whole thing with improving my speech was to build my business, the whole thing about saying my name wasn't to say my name, it was to ingratiate myself into a new community. And after services, we'd have this luncheon for 150, 200 people would be there, milling around. And so I decided this was it. I was going to introduce myself willingly to an adult for the first time in my life. I'm 57 years old. And just like in everything else I did in this journey, I was going to start with the easiest thing first. And so I was looking for little old ladies, and there were quite a few. And I found one who was maybe up to my waist. And I said, that's the one. I kind of positioned myself to get in her way as she was walking. And I was about to introduce myself, and I pulled back. I just wasn't ready.
Oh,
I just wasn't ready. I turned around, I kind of steadied myself, kind of laughed about it. Again, doing opposite to what the stuttering mind would be, to be shaky and rigid, laughed to myself. I began picturing her with warm rays of light coming out of her face. This is true. I felt I was basking in her warmth. I pictured her with a smile on her face. I turned around, got into position. I said, "Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Larry Stein." Oh my God, first time. Now, I had not planned to say, "Hi, I don't think we've met." I had just planned to say, "Hi, I'm Larry Stein." But I was just so caught up in the moment. And I needed a runway, which is a very popular thing for stutterers to need. I needed a runway to get some words out. I can get air going. And so I said, "Hi, I don't think." And so I went from her and I found some more other little old ladies. And I just walked around the room introducing myself to little old ladies, planning to say, "Hi, I'm Larry Stein." But instead it's coming out, "Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Larry Stein." And that was day one. And it was an unbelievable feeling.
And you had a whole new group of friends. They all happened to be little old ladies that came up to your waist.
Right, right. But then the next week came around, and I had this opportunity, and I had tried to keep the machinery going through the week, introduce myself. Saturday comes along, and services end, go into the luncheon afterward, which is called a kiddush, and I introduced myself to a few other little old ladies, and then I said, "All right, I'm going to introduce myself to women." It was always easier for me to talk to women. And so I went from little old ladies then to women close to my own age. And wow, "Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Larry Stein." Still trying to just say I'm Larry Stein, but it just comes out that way, from just nervousness. Third week comes around. A couple more women. I said, "All right, I think I'm ready for the big kahuna. I'm going to introduce myself to men." I went to little old men, and I walked around, introduced myself to little old men. Years later, after I gave a talk on this little old man came up to me and said, "So that's why you were kept on introducing yourself to me." He said, "You must have introduced yourself to me 5 times." I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize it." And now he's like maybe up to my belly button, but he now he like comes up to me and he introduces himself just for fun,
Oh,
He's
how
laughing.
funny.
Isn't that hilarious? Oh, there's so many things
Well, all I
that
could
make
think
it
of
funny.
is, even when you were going around introducing yourself to all those little old ladies, and here you are, they didn't know you. Of course, you're a new
No.
parishioner or whatever. And they're probably thinking, who is this guy? He must have a thing for older women because he's, introducing all himself to all of us. And, there's not a woman on his arm. I think that's really hilarious. But it also is another important technique or that you were talking about is small steps.
Yes.
And
Yes.
starting with the smallest and the safest.
Right. I always go easiest on out. So I want it to be a natural progression because I experienced so much failure in my life, so much failure. And so here I was on the third week. I had a little lament, and then I said, "I am ready for this." And so I found some men my own age, and I'm walking up to them for the first time in my life that I'm ever doing this. "Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Larry Stein." "I think we've met. I'm Larry Stein." And then I'm looking for guys who would be ordinarily intimidating. Now, if you met me, you'd see that I'm 6'1", about 215, 220, 225, depending on the week. He used to play football and all that. You'd say, "Wow, he's a pretty big guy. What is he intimidated for?" I mean, and but inside the mind is a whole different thing, as
Mhm.
you know, I think pretty well. And so I found a guy wearing like a $3,000 suit. "Larry Stein, Larry Stein, Larry Stein." And the third guy who I had done this with, no ramp up, no high, I don't think we met up, just straightforward, looking right in the eye, just walking up to these guys. And it's a cliche, but it was true for me. It was like the world fell off my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Tingled. It was like the sun shone on me, birds tweeting.
Mm-hmm.
This was, it was right out of a movie. Life had changed.
Mm-hmm.
My life was changed from that point on forever. I was not totally through with stuttering, and there is no cure. And I can be caught up in moments still. Like if I'm traveling in a foreign country, I don't know the language, things are moving fast, I'm in a market, trying to,
Mm-hmm.
ask for a vegetable, whatever. But and but I now felt there was no need to hide ever. I
Mm-hmm.
could be me. And the interesting thing was I was left with less than what I was. All the veils, all the things I was hiding behind, it
Mm-hmm.
was just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the real me. I felt I
Mm-hmm.
was finally me. And I am now a very different person than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there,
So you're no
I,
longer Matt Lauer.
oh, I can still do Matt Lauer, but I'm not that person who's
Mm-hmm.
avoiding. I'm not that person who's in the corner. I do public speaking now and then. I haven't done it for a while because I was so caught up doing the book, but now I'm
Well,
getting
yeah.
back to it. Um, and I, regularly give little talks to little groups to people, and they aren't paid because I'm just doing it
Mm-hmm.
just as a volunteer thing for fun. Before those were paid,
Mm-hmm.
but and I'm going to get back to those.
Mm-hmm.
But just to be able to freedom of
Yeah.
expressing yourself
Yeah.
after so many decades, a lifetime of living like a prisoner, and here I am free. I cannot express to you how thankful I am
Mm-hmm.
and how different my life is. And I'm just going to talk about something that's kind of controversial.
Okay, go for it.
The new the new thing in speech therapy is to love your stutter, to accept your stutter, embrace it, love it. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to improve yourself. You're perfect the way you are. That is a very big thing now in the stuttering world. Much like as you probably heard with cochlear implants. No, you don't need those. Deafness is beautiful, and it may be, I don't know. And maybe stuttering is beautiful, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. But for me, with a severe stutter most of my life, I had this changed my life. And to think, I mean, I had failed so many times in so many attempts to try to improve my speech. And this was just one last attempt, again, out of money, just out of survival, really. To think that I would have missed that I would have missed knowing who I really could be,
Mm-hmm.
that I would have missed the enjoyment that I had, the warmth of connection, the opportunity to connect with people, to express myself, to be who I really am, to just be me. And I would have missed all that. And a lot of people are missing that. And so that's why what I do now is I mentor people all over the world, one on one. We meet for an hour a week, sometimes twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
They're in crazy places. I've talked to people in Kathmandu. I've talked, right now, I'm talking to people in Australia, uh, France. Uh, they're all over the world, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've talked to people in a yurt in Kurdistan. They're
Wow.
laying on the floor They're introduced. This is my father. I look down and the guy's laying down on the floor in a yurt all over the world. And I do this for free because I feel, and they feel like they're getting so much out of it, but I'm getting just as much,
If not more.
if not more. And because I'm just loving this opportunity to connect. And, this is not supposed to happen.
Right.
What you're seeing with me, I mean, people live, some people make some improvement in their speech. That's great.
Mhm.
But the freedom that I have, there are not many people like that. And so I feel so like I've given such a gift, something that was such a curse
Mhm.
for me. I've recognized it as a gift and I have to give that gift.
Mhm.
And so right now I meet with like 8 people through the week.
Mhm.
And
Free of
um,
charge. I just want to
oh
emphasize
yeah,
that. You're giving your
no
time.
offense. Oh, absolutely. And frankly, I'd like to do it more. I'd like to do
Mhm.
it as much as I can.
Mhm.
And people are making progress. Many of these
Mhm.
people are now giving speeches now. They're
Mhm.
doing Toastmasters. They're
Mhm.
they're moving up in their company now. I had one
Mhm.
guy who was he was gonna quit his job. You know, and I'm only taking people who are adults
Mhm.
and who've gone through speech therapy and they're frustrated and they've gone nowhere. This guy actually was with one of the most well-known speech therapists in the world, and he had just given up. And he said, "I'm going to quit my job." I said, "Don't quit your job." I had met him right when he was going to do that. I said, "Don't quit your job. Let's see if we can do something together."
Mhm.
And after a year, maybe 9 months or a year, he was beginning to give talks at his company. He was moving up in the company, and uh, there's just so much joy. The notes I get to people, the conversations I have with people are
Mhm.
just they're incredible. I I can't believe that these kind of experiences are possible.
Mhm.
And many therapists told me that, what you did, you're kind of a one-off. You got very, you know, you created something that works for you and won't work for anyone else. Well, I have many of the people that I'm working with have
Mhm.
really they're accomplishing their dreams.
Mhm.
And as much as my experience was gratifying for me,
Mhm.
seeing them progress in their lives
Mhm.
is the most gratifying thing, other than having children, grandchildren,
Mhm.
that I've ever had. I'm
So I
incredibly
have to go back with your little controversial statement because you kind of triggered me a little bit here. Okay, so
oh, it's a trigger.
it was, it's the fact that somebody would say that this is the best it's going to be, and we'll just help you, like, compensate or just deal with this. The same thing with the cochlear implants and that type of thing. And what you were describing, you see that too in the body positivity movement. And I'm not knocking it, but it's like it's okay to be that overweight. You're beautiful as you are, and yeah, everybody is beautiful. Everybody is beautiful, but it's more about your health and how that might be impacting your health, not only your physical health but your mental health. And for the experts to just pat you on the head, because that's what happened to me, and say,
Hmm.
this is the, you're going to have to live with this, and that's just the way it's going to be, but don't worry, we will take care of you. I was a chronic pain patient for 2.5 years when I was in my mid 30s, and
Hmm.
told that I would never be able to do my laundry and my grocery shopping all in the same day, because the arthritis in my spine was so severe I would end up being bedridden and start applying for disability because I was going to need it. And I was 36 years old. I know, make a long story short, it took me, when I got that prognosis, I hit rock bottom for a few days and then had the mental head smacking moment a few days later going, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way. I fired my medical team and I figured it out on my own. And 9 months later,
Wow.
I was pain free. So, yeah, it can happen. And that's another important point for the audience. And my listeners who listen all the time are going, here's the speech again. You can heal from anything. Our bodies, our minds are incredibly malleable, flexible, able to change at every stage of life and to not give up. We have the power to heal. We just need to give ourselves the right environment and the right tools to do it. And you, like me, found those tools on your own. So right now, I'm going to, for those people who are on YouTube, I'm lifting up a copy of the book, Free to Speak. It's a beautiful cover with is that a dove flying over there on the top corner?
I think it's a seagull, actually.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's a seagull.
Obviously, I'm a mountain girl. I'm not, much on the beach, but yeah.
Right,
So
right,
it's
right.
it's a beautiful book, and it is the title is Free to Speak, and the subtitle is My Journey from Stuttering to Public Speaking. So it's an incredible book. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but so I'm curious, do you include in the book some of these techniques that you used for yourself?
Yeah, everything. Everything's
Everything.
in there. What I tried to do is I tried to bring the reader through my mind
Well, you did
and
that.
how I
Yeah.
felt through all of
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely in the mind or the head of a 12-year-old boy, which is really interesting because I've never been in that kind of a place before.
that. Yeah, and all the way through my life. And it became kind of an adventure story. And that's how it was for me. Once I began to make a little progress, it became this exhilarating adventure. It was like I had a machete in my hand. I was in the Amazon. I'm cutting through the jungle, taking on one challenge after the other, and things that speaking situations that used to be paralyzing to me became an adventure.
Hmm.
And because I was stacking one small success after a time, and these things that used to be paralyzing to me
Hmm.
were now, I think I can do this. I'm ready for this. And I
Hmm.
did them. And I
That's
just
why I
went
kept
on and
emphasizing the
on and
small
on.
steps because what you're describing, it's almost, and as you're using your hands for those people who are listening and not watching on YouTube, as stacking those little small steps, you can just see the exponential growth that was happening from those small steps. And I think that people get really overwhelmed when either they want to reclaim their health, lose weight, do something like get rid of a bad habit or stop stuttering. They're trying to go from where they are right now to the very end. And they don't
Right.
realize that even one small, tiny step is absolutely huge.
No step is insignificant. No matter how small it is, it's a building block for the next one. As long as you keep taking them, as long as
Hmm.
you take them in rapid succession. Some people say, well, I'll do something this week and maybe next week, maybe in a couple weeks. No, keep doing it, keep reinforcing it, keep building on it. And my mantra early on was there may not be a solution. I mean, there's no solution to stuttering, there's no cure. There may not be a solution, but there's always a way forward.
Hmm.
And other people have taken different ways.
Hmm.
Very few people get to the point where they're freely speaking like I am, but but there are other ways of improving. And I've used this model now to handle other challenges in my life. Believe me, there's no shortage for everyone.
Hmm.
And as it turns out, I just as I learned that my whole thing about doing the opposite was a tenet of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Hmm.
That taking my small steps was I was doing exposure therapy on myself. I had no idea. I just learned
Hmm.
that years later.
Hmm.
But this is all, to my surprise, is all based on real psychological stuff that I did.
Hmm.
But but it was hard work and it was a long, slow slog. But the interesting thing was I learned that there's pleasure, there's joy in going through the slog.
Hmm.
It's so it, it wouldn't seem like it would be,
Hmm.
but there's joy in going through it.
Hmm.
most people, and I was one of them for decades,
Mhm.
shy away from it. They
Mhm.
don't, it's the scariest thing. The things that I was doing were incredibly scary for me at one point, but because I took them in small steps,
Mhm.
it became a logical progression to
Mhm.
get there. So you may not think you're ready to take on these challenges, whatever it is, whether it's losing weight, stuttering, whatever it is, pain. You may not think you're ready, and you probably are not. You're probably not ready,
Mhm.
but neither was I.
Mhm.
But once I just took a couple small steps and made just a little progress, you catch fire and you
Mhm.
become that person who is ready. You
Mhm.
become that person who's ready to take on new things,
Mhm.
and you can make progress beyond. I am living now a life I had no concept, no possible thought that I can live.
Mhm.
And so, like you were saying, there are ways, and you
Mhm.
can and you can create a life beyond your wildest dreams, which I have, and I think you have too.
Well, yes, it hasn't been easy. I will be the first
Not
to admit
easy.
that, but it never is. But if it was easy, then it wouldn't be as sweet when you get to the end. So,
The joy is
mhm.
incredible.
So, Larry, how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you? Where can they get your book? Obviously, all of your links to social media, they're on the show notes forever and ever. But I really like for my guests to be able to articulate it. It just makes it sound a lot more personal. And because we love hearing you speak.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It's just an absolute pleasure to be with you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Where to find me? Go, well, the book is on Amazon. It's called
Mhm.
Free to Speak: My Journey from Stuttering to Public Speaking. And, the journey never ends. Where to find me? You can go on my website, steinonstuttering.com. You can find me on Instagram, Stein on Stuttering, uh,
Oh,
Facebook,
YouTube.
Stein on Stuttering, YouTube, Stein on Stuttering. They're all Stein on Stuttering. I think on YouTube, maybe it's Stein on Stuttering 3008. For some reason,
Mhm.
they have that. But, and you can email me and
Mhm.
I will get back to you.
Mhm.
I will get back to you. And if you want to meet on Zoom, I will meet you on Zoom. And if you stutter, if you want me to mentor you, I'm happy to do that. And I'm happy to meet with you on Zoom. And there's no charge for anything I do. This is I I just feel so incredibly thankful.
Mhm.
It is an honor to work with people. And this is what I do in
Mhm.
addition to
Well,
my regular.
it has been an honor to speak with you. It's been an honor to have you on the show. And it's an incredible conversation. What a story. I mean, wow. And the fact that you were able to find your voice and teach others to do the same thing, that is such an empowering experience. So thank you
It
for
has been the
everything you
ride of
do.
my life. Well, thank you. Thank you. It has been wonderful. Really appreciate the opportunities to speak with you and your friends. And I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. Well, you know how to find me now.
That's right.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. What an incredible story. And there are so many pearls of wisdom in this episode. Just take some small steps. The small steps really do add up. Get rid of the victim mindset. It's not doing us any good. And we all have our fears. We all have our struggles, but our mind, our brain, our nervous system, our bodies are capable of changing no matter what. At every age, we have the capacity to heal ourselves as long as we give our body and our mind the right environment and the right tools to do so. Go to Larry's website, check it out, get his book. It's a fantastic read. It really does take you into the mind of a small child who is struggling. And remember, we can all just live a life beyond our dreams. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.